Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our high-level political forum side event, responding to climate anxiety, cultivating resilience and hope in youth. My name is Lauren Grant. I am a youth representative for the UN NGO Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I am usually based in Australia, but very fortunate to be joining today from New York. In my country, we like to open events by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. So to begin, I invite you in joining me to pay our respects to our elders past and present. Let us take a moment to acknowledge and honor the power of the sun, wind and rain that nurtures life on earth, the spirit of the fields, the forests and mountains, oceans and rivers, and all that lives within. The wisdom of our ancestors, the Indigenous peoples, and the original inhabitants of the land we are on. In particular, we wish to acknowledge the land upon which the United Nations headquarters stands, politically designated as New York City, the homeland of the Lenape people who were violently displaced as a result of European settler colonialism over the course of 400 years. The Lenape are diasporic people who remain closely connected with the land and are its rightful stewards. We also recognize that New York City has one of the largest urban Native American Indigenous populations in the United States. Let us affirm our desire for right relations with all Indigenous peoples built on respect. Let us commit to redress the harms of colonization. Today's side event is hosted by the IBVM Loretto Generate, Maryknoll Sisters of St. Dominic, Medical Mission Sisters, and the Congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace, who are all NGOs, the UN. They have worked in partnership with Water Spirit, the Regis St. Michael's Faculty of Theology, the Elliott Allen Institute for Theology and Ecology, and the Mary Ward Center. We are pleased to be with you today to talk about resilience and hope in the face of climate anxiety. I will now introduce our moderator, Kikashan Basu, who will present our speakers. Kikashan is an iconic global influencer, educator, environmentalist, champion of women and children's rights. She is also a TEDx speaker, climate reality mentor, author, musician, and peace and sustainability campaigner. She is the recipient of Canada's Meritorious Service Medal and the only Canadian to win the International Children's Peace Prize. Welcome, Kikashan.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for the kind introduction, and hello, everyone. I am delighted to join you all today from the UN headquarters here at DHLPF and to host this high-level political forum side event. As was just mentioned, I'm Gekasha. I'm founder-president of Green Hope Foundation, which I founded at the age of 12 to address the severe lack of inclusivity of marginalized and underserved communities in addressing our world's most pressing challenges. And my work focuses on building resilience and hope in the face of the worst impacts of climate change through concrete ground level solutions, utilizing clean energy technology to drive climate resilience, whereby we work on using clean tech to build schools to provide climate resilience education to girls, solar powered sewing schools to ensure vulnerable women are able to achieve economic justice and security, build solar water farms to address the water insecurity caused by climate change. But one of the major impacts that we have seen is not only the physical impacts, but also the very severe emotional and mental toll that climate change takes on people and the people in the communities that we work in. And this mental toll and psychological stress is almost always directed at the most vulnerable populations within these communities, namely women and young people, and especially girls. So for instance, in the climate disaster zones that we work with in Bangladesh and Liberia, we see that due to climate change destroying the infrastructure of communities, how women and girls don't have the freedom of coming out of their homes in the evenings due to a complete absence of light. And if they do come out, they can be subject to abuse, exploitation, trafficking. And so the girls don't feel safe coming out of their homes at dawn to go to school or even walking back from school in the evenings. And as a result, they just don't go to school. So there's this tremendous stress, the mental and emotional toll that is just put on them as all of that as a result of climate change. And so my team and I installed solar streetlights in these communities to make sure that the women and girls were able to have the freedom to come out of their homes in the evenings, thereby ensuring that we were helping restore their mental and emotional well-being and psychological safety. So the lesson learned from this being that while the physical impacts of climate change are more visible to us and therefore easier to address somehow, we very often forget that there's always a mental and emotional toll in the face of such disasters. And ignoring this mental and emotional stress can lead to a host of other intersectional problems that hinder efforts to create climate resilience. And so that is why today's topic of responding to climate anxiety, cultivating resilience and hope in youth is such a timely topic, because if we want to truly build a climate resilient future, it is imperative that we address this often seen emotional and mental stress and toll on our most vulnerable populations. So today we have with us a very eminent group of speakers and presenters who will share their insights on this very important topic. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Hilda Koster and Dr. Cynthia Cameron, both from the University of Toronto, to share an overview of the topic of climate anxiety and the tools that faith traditions can offer to help cultivate resilience and hope, especially among young people. So Dr. Hilda Koster is the Sisters of St. Joseph of Toronto Associate Professor of Ecological Theology and the director of the Elliott Allen Institute for Theology and Ecology at the University of St. Michael's College at the University of Toronto. Dr. Koster's research focuses on ecological theology, climate justice, and ecofeminism. And she has authored numerous publications which have appeared in Theology Today, Modern Theology, the Journal of Religion, the Anglican Theological Review, and Scriptura. Dr. Cynthia Cameron holds the Patrick and Barbara Keegan Chair in Religious Education and is Assistant Professor of Religious Education at the St. Michael's Faculty of Theology and the University of St. Michael's College at the University of Toronto. And her research focuses on questions of female adolescence in theological anthropology, practices of Catholic schooling, and self-harming behaviors in adolescent girls and young women. She is also the co-author with Christopher J. Welch of Life Abundant, God and the Created Order in Catholic Social Perspective, as well as several peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. So the complete bios for Hilda and Cynthia are available in the chat. I am very excited to hear their perspectives, not only as a moderator, but also as an alum of the University of Toronto myself. So Hilda and Cynthia, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So good afternoon from us as well. We're speaking from both Toronto and the United States. I am in Minnesota. And thank you, Keke-san, for this very fine introduction, not only to ourselves, but also to the topic for this panel. My name, again, is Hilda Koster, and together with my colleague, Dr. Cynthia Cameron, I'm presenting on our project, Critical Conversations in Catholic Education, Educating Towards Ecological Resilience in a Climate Justice Curriculum, which we are conducting within Catholic schools in the Greater Toronto Area. Our presentation consists today of two parts. First, I will be introducing a framework for thinking about climate anxiety among youth. And then second, Dr. Cameron will be talking about resilience and hope in relation to our project. So first on climate anxieties. The climate alarm bells keep ringing. The litany of life-threatening events read as a biblical reckoning. Fire and floods, intensifying heat waves, melting ice sheets, warming and rising oceans. There can be no doubt about the urgency of our situation. To preserve a livable planet, humanity must act immediately. It should not come as a surprise then that many people, young people in particular, are experiencing climate change-related fear and anxiety as also a profound sense of grief for what is already lost. Mental health experts have identified ecological anxiety as a growing mental health concern. In her important book, Generation Dread, Finding Purpose in an Age of Climate Anxiety, author and public mental health researcher Britt Ray defines climate anxiety as a form of ecological anxiety, which she defines as a chronic fear of environmental doom, characterized by frustration, powerlessness, feeling overwhelmed, hopelessness, and helplessness. Undermines our ontological security. It undermines our basic trust in the continuation of the order of life and trust in other people, especially those in positions of leadership. Climate anxiety, therefore, is often accompanied by two other emotions: ecological grief and global dread. Ecological grief is, quote, grief felt in relation to experienced or anticipated ecological losses, including the loss of species, ecosystems, and meaningful landscapes, end quote. Global dread is, quote, the anticipation of an apocalyptic future state of the world, accompanied by feeling of terror and sadness for those who will exist in such a state, end quote. A final important characteristic of climate change and climate anxiety is that people feel both helpless and guilty at the same time. Many of us are contributing to climate change-related destruction by living our day-to-day lives, by what we eat, how we travel, where we invest our money, etc. And yet climate change transcends our individual moral agency. It cannot be solved by our individual actions alone. In fact, our individual actions often seem utterly ineffective and immaterial. And to make things worse, green energy solutions themselves often come with environmental and social costs. Anxieties in youth and trauma. I have now defined climate anxiety a little bit. And we know that climate anxiety, as it manifests itself in helplessness, anger, and grief and dread, is prominent, especially among young people. Britt Ray conducted a survey among 10,000 young people aged 16 to 25 in 10 countries around the world, among which Brazil, Nigeria, the Philippines, and India. And she found that 45 of the respondents said that their feelings about climate change negatively affect their daily life and functioning. Over half of the young people said that they think humanity is doomed and that world leaders cannot be trusted and or are inadequate when it comes to climate action. It's important to note, however, that while climate anxiety is a growing mental health concern among young people, it is not a pathology. Climate anxiety is a healthy moral emotion in face of the accurate understanding of the severity of our planetary crisis. The problem then is not the fact that young people and the rest of us are feeling anxious, sad, angry, and frustrated. The problem is that so many of us do not. So one important way psychologists and pastoral theologians, and I'm referring here to my Toronto School of Theology colleague, Pam McCarroll, seek to better understand climate-related emotions is through trauma theory. These scholars link the fight, flight, fright, and freeze trauma responses to reactions to climate change. School teachers and educators working with grades 7 through 12 report that the flight and freeze response are common among youth. Kids flee the reality of climate change by focusing on things they supposedly can control, for instance, their friends, their physical fitness, or social media. Older kids may develop an addiction to alcohol or drugs. The freeze response can be seen when kids just dissociate, for instance, by constantly being on their iPhones. They simply do not allow themselves to feel the threat or the sense of powerlessness that the climate crisis put upon them. Thus, while many young people have used the climate emotions, their anger and their fear, to kind of be actively involved in activism, there are also many others who respond by totally disengaging from climate change and the world, or the larger issues of the world. Trauma theory may help us better understand these attitudes as psychological reactions. They are defense mechanisms and coping strategies in face of overwhelming, ever-present and ever-growing threat. Trauma theory is also helpful for understanding the emotions of those young people who have had first-hand experience with the devastating effects of climate change. For instance, because they were displaced due to wildfires, droughts, or melting ice. I'm thinking here especially of indigenous communities for whom the destruction caused by climate change typically also means a destruction of a traditional way of life. On this slide, we see a quote from Inuit activist Shirawat Clothier, who's not a youth by any means, but who describes very poignantly what is happening to her community. I'm not going to read it, I will just keep it up for a little bit. Climate anxiety then is not simply a preoccupation of people of relative privilege. Climate change intersects with settler colonial violence, racism, sexism, heteronormativity, and poverty. Communities already affected by climate change are also the ones that have done the least to cause the climate catastrophe and typically have very little economic and political power. Climate change clearly is a matter of severe injustice. Yet this does not mean that thoughts and feelings associated with climate anxiety are not prevalent in minoritized and otherwise vulnerable communities, as Kaysen also so eloquently pointed out in her introduction. What it does mean is that climate threats affect different groups and people differently. It is crucial, therefore, to attend to the variety of ways in which climate change-related emotions manifest themselves, especially in those for whom climate change amplifies already existing threats and harms. In fact, I think it is in itself a form of epistemic injustice to fail to attend to the grief, fear, and profound loss people, and especially young people who are affected by climate disasters, experience. Their stories and emotions, their courage and struggle should in fact be our guide when we try to understand what is happening to our planet and for cultivating eco-social resilience for climate justice. In sum then, climate anxiety is a growing mental health issue that especially affects young people. Climate anxiety is both a psychological and a moral crisis. Climate anxiety signals both a psychological, eco-justice, and spiritual need, to which we want to bring both psychological, moral, and spiritual resources, especially by drawing on the tradition of Catholic social teaching. Over now to my colleague, Dr. Cynthia Cameron.
Thank you so much, Dr. Koster. So the reality that Dr. Koster has outlined is what prompted our project with educators in Catholic schools in the Greater Toronto area. With the support of a generous grant from the Association of Theological Schools, which is our accrediting organization, we wanted in our project to work with educators who are in the trenches of witnessing climate anxiety in their students and in themselves. We wanted to listen to teachers as they described the ways that they and their students understood the climate crisis, reacted to it with a variety of emotional responses, including those that Dr. Koster has described, and engaged in practices that support resilience and hope in youth. We offered 2 workshops with teachers and other education professionals. The first workshop looked at ways of defining climate anxiety and at the resources offered by Catholic social teaching, especially Pope Francis's groundbreaking 2015 encyclical Laudato Si. The second workshop explored questions of the relationship between science and theology and how both are necessary for responding adequately to experiences of suffering and trauma in response to the climate crisis. Our final conference, which will be in October here at the University of St. Michael's College, will explore the resources that Catholic religious education has at its disposal for listening to young people and cultivating hope for a more just future with them. This conference will feature keynote speaker Dr. Joyce Mercer from Yale University, who will explore questions of climate anxiety, youth agency, and hope. We will also invite educators, parents, and other concerned community members to think practically about how we can educate for climate resilience in our Catholic schools, and to think about how Indigenous ways of knowing in particular can be put into conversation with questions of youth climate anxiety and Catholic social teaching, and how all of these things can inform our thinking about educating for a faithful and resilient hope. In all of our work in this project, we have found that teachers really, really appreciated the opportunity to engage both theoretical learning about climate anxiety and to think with us and with each other about practical strategies for accompanying young people. In cultivating hope, we, as Catholic educators, rely deeply on the Catholic Church's social justice teachings, especially those focused on the principles of solidarity, attentiveness to the vulnerable, and the sacredness of both human life and the entirety of creation. Pope Francis's Laudato Si provides educators with an example of how good scientific knowledge and sound theological reflection can lead to just pastoral practice in schools, parishes, and other church-sponsored ministries. It is our hope, therefore, that teachers and all of us can feel empowered to make this same move, so that grounded in sound ecological information and the Church's teachings on the need for action in the face of climate change, we can ask ourselves how we can accompany young people through climate anxiety towards a more hopeful vision of a just world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hilda and Cynthia, for that very comprehensive overview of climate anxiety and how it is connected to like how it can lead to apathy, how it cannot lead to apathy, how it can lead to hope and to resilience. And I think it's really important that we're seeing it in this way now, the emotional response, because before we used to only see climate change as a group of data points. It was very disconnected from humanity. And now we're like, okay, actually that's not it. It has like very real impacts on people. And as was just mentioned, it has been having impacts for a really long time. And so different groups of people are feeling this emotion, this anxiety in very different ways and for a longer period of time as well. And I'm really glad you shared as well how faith traditions can definitely offer responses of hope and resilience. So thank you very much, Hilda and Cynthia, for your presentations. I would now like to turn it over to our panel presentation. So I will just begin by quickly providing an introduction for each of our 4 speakers. And then we'll move on to a more conversational panel discussion. So we have with us Melody Ng, who is the child of Hong Kong immigrants and considers Toronto home. She has worked as an art therapist in communities facing marginalization. Melody is studying at the University of St. Michael's College, Toronto School of Theology, specializing in ecology and theology. She discovered farming in 2019 and now works as an urban farmer. She loves reading, her cats, and listening to song sparrows. Welcome, Melody. We have with us Blair Nelson, who is the Executive Director of Water Spirit, a spiritual ecology nonprofit sponsored by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. Through programs, education, and advocacy, Water Spirit inspires, informs, and empowers people of all beliefs to deepen their consciousness of the sacredness of water and all of Earth's systems. Water Spirit has been an affiliate of the Good Grief Network since 2019, hosting eco-anxiety support groups using their 10-step method. Welcome, Blair. We also have with us Immaculate Tusingwere, who is a medical mission sister from Uganda. She serves as the Communication and Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Coordinator at the Association of Religious in Uganda. She works with the Laudato Si movement as a member of the Global Membership Council and as a Laudato Si animator of animators. Welcome, Immaculate. And lastly, we have Thomas Gold, who grew up in New York's Hudson Valley and in Mexico. He received his bachelor's degree in humanities from Yale, which included coursework in environmental and energy policy. After the pandemic, he worked as an assistant and consultant to the Creation Care Committee for the Episcopal Diocese of New York. He now works in Washington, D.C. at the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns, which advocates for action on international issues, including climate change and integral ecology. So welcome, Thomas, and welcome to all of our panelists. Very excited to have you all here today. We will hear about 5-minute presentations from each of you, and then we'll have the opportunity for our panelists to interact with one another, and then we'll open the floor for questions from our audience as well. So in the order of introduction, I will first give the floor to Melody. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. So just do that first. Can everyone see what I have here?
Yes.
Yeah, you can hear me okay? All right,
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm a farm manager and I work in Toronto, Treaty 13 territory. And this farm is called Common Table Farm. So I'm happy to share with you where I see hope and resilience being cultivated here. And a concept that I kind of want to leave with you, so one thing you can take away is that of embodied hope as something that can ground us and sustain us and our communities to remain committed to action. And I'll kind of unpack what that is through my 5 minutes. So Common Table Farm is a project of a larger ministry called Flemington Park Ministry. And we work in a neighborhood where there are a lot of new immigrants, refugees, people new to Canada, and we support them in a variety of ways in our drop-in space and through programs. But I won't talk too much about that because I'm going to focus on our farm. And the farm operates on the land of Church of Our Savior, Don Mills. So this is an Anglican church that has partnered with us and allows us to use this space, and they gift us the use of the land to grow produce for the community. I included this photo of Allison, who's a young person who has worked on the farm team a number of seasons, because I feel like it really captures what Nicola Cregan is talking about in describing hope as a stance, a way of being in the world. And I just love sort of the energy in her body and in this movement that she has in helping break ground for the farm. And hope is cultivated not alone, but in community. So we see this at our farm and in Flemington Park Ministry as a whole. Here are some of our core volunteers who help with vegetable distribution and food programs that we have. They're certainly essential to all of what we do, and farm staff and volunteers, many people coming together to make this happen. We grow, we distribute in the community to those who are needing some extra support, who are experiencing food insecurity. And we scaffold our hope not just with other humans, but also with the soil, the microbes, the bees and pollinators, the sun, the rain, everything that the earth provides to us in order for us to sustain through food and food production. This is another quotation by Cregan that I really resonate with. The only stories that will offer us real hope are ones that come to terms with our radical embeddedness in and dependence on matter, and with the incarnation's radical ongoing embeddedness as well. It's for those of us with a faith background, perhaps that speaks to us, and especially if you're a gardener or you grow food, we encounter that at the farm daily through the harvesting, tending, and eating and sharing the food that is God's divine love for us. The farm hopes to embody a hopeful food system as an alternative to big agriculture, industrial farming. Our farm is hyper local, and we can invite youth in to participate in all of the activities that need to happen. And it's also in how we farm. So because we're so small scale, we are really keen and careful to learn ecological farming practices that support the health of the soil, minimizing tillage. And it's a gift because we're farming on this small scale, we have the opportunity to witness the life in the soil, the community in the soil, because we're working so closely with it. And I think we're also restored by wonder and by beauty with this small scale agriculture. We're grounded by the seasons and by what we can notice each day or each week as things are changing constantly. And this invites us to be in that close relationship with all these other beings, all these other forces that keep us alive and that keep us healthy. And we're also reintroduced to long lost relatives. So Robin Wall Kimmerer, Indigenous author and scientist, writes that as our human dominance of the world has grown, we have become more isolated, more lonely when we can no longer call out to our neighbors. So at the farm, we get to befriend our neighbors. We get to encounter them, and it's in direct relationship with what we're doing on the farm as well. So here's some milkweed we've planted, and the monarch decided to come have a snack, and some green sweat peas visiting some of the onion blooms there. It's a place of restoration and rejuvenation. So, monoculture lawn has been transformed over a few years into pollinator gardens. And this is just, it's just really renewing to see what happens when you kind of support biodiversity, how you support new life coming back to what was just sort of a dead zone. And we can invite youth and kids to participate in that work, helping plant native plants, helping with the learning how to grow food and to harvest it and share it with their neighbors, and learning about issues of food insecurity in their own neighborhoods and communities. So all of that is quite hopeful, I think. And I'll leave you with this last image of the farm, as well as the image of seeds, which I feel are the embodiment of hope that you can hold right in your hand. So embodied hope for me is the bringing of our intentions to meet with our physical bodies, movement and experiences and actions that we can take in community together. And these actions of embodied hope occur in a world that is responsive. So as we see the earth responding to our care, I think this also nurtures our hope. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Melody, for speaking to us about embodied hope. And, that really resonated with me, especially as a grassroots actor. And I like how you highlighted that, small scale farming helps to provide that hope through these very small, but very important actions that often in large scale agriculture and large scale work, you kind of just forget about ensuring kindness towards both the land and the environment, as well as the people. And as you said, all of that definitely brings about hope. So thank you very much for sharing the work that you do here today. I will now hand the floor over to Blair Nelson. Over to you, Blair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to speak here today. Hello, everyone from the Lenni Lenape land, also called New Jersey, that I occupy, excuse me. In my position as Executive Director of Water Spirit back in 2019, I added programming on the topic of climate emotions like eco-anxiety and climate grief. When we are working to protect the environment, the burden can feel heavy to bear. And I believe that processing our feelings in safe spaces, which faith communities are poised to be, is one way that we can metabolize and move through those feelings into long-term action that is sustainable and meaningful to us. As Doctors Hilda and Cynthia brought up in their opening presentation, I do want to take a moment to turn to the Lancet study from 2021. Climate emotions are gaining scholarly attention, and this survey of 10,000 global youth was particularly remarkable. They found that 60% of the youth from the global North and South reported that the climate crisis was causing a negative impact on their mental health. 75% said that the future seemed frightening. 39% were resistant to having children because of climate change. And as Reverend Talitha Amadea Aho shares, the young people of today do not remember stability. They see the world through crisis-colored glasses. Clearly, the mental health impacts of the climate crisis are something that we all have to be prepared to take seriously and realize that there is often a very significant generational break in outlook and expectation of what the world is supposed to feel like or be like, or what the future is supposed to feel like. Now, faith communities are uniquely poised to help with climate distress, but we need to be certain that we are prepared to address these climate emotions specifically. This training is vital because pastoral care for those experiencing climate mental health issues is a specialized field and context. Standard pastoral care training and ministry courses are unlikely to have specifically addressed how climate distress differs from other forms of mental ill health. So if you're thinking to yourself that climate anxiety, grief, or other forms of mental ill health and impacts have never come up before in your faith communities, there's a chance you're not asking the right questions. As climate anxiety gains increasing attention around the world, it is coming to light that many have been experiencing these feelings for years, and that their distress has been made worse by their sense of isolation and not having anyone to talk to or share with, for fear of being seen as a bummer or too extreme or depressed or crazy. We now know that climate distress is a perfectly normal and healthy response to the climate crisis. And it's important not to pathologize these emotions. By feeling and talking about our emotions, being supported by community and taking action together, we can not only live with, but thrive with our climate distress and the environmental empathy and awareness it signals. As the climate crisis creates and exacerbates mental health crises within our communities, those providing pastoral care to our congregations, to the wider community, and to youth are on the front lines. Our churches and faith communities are present in almost every town and city around the world. Few other organizations have the reach or the depth of relationship that faith communities do, and mental health resources around the world are already stretched thin. So we are called to form a safety net, to be a place where anyone experiencing climate-related mental health issues knows that they can come to have safe conversations about what they are feeling, and if needed, to be referred on to appropriate professional help. Providing pastoral care to those who are grieving can be familiar territory to those in church and faith community roles and chaplaincy roles. This knowledge and experience and the rituals that we use to help people in processing their grief are huge assets that we can bring to helping those experiencing ecological and climate grief as well. Eco-grief is a common experience, but rarely acknowledged. By acknowledging and living with our ecological grief, we can come to recognize that the roots of this pain is our love for the world, for its creatures, and for our Creator God. Therefore, it is important not to suppress these emotions. We also have rich traditions of lament and the collective acknowledgement of grief, which we can use to help people face and share their true feelings about climate change and environmental destruction. So when I consider the question, what does cultivating hope and resilience in response to climate anxiety look like in my context? I think about hope with a qualifier. I think about community. I think about increasing recognition of the ongoing trauma caused by natural disasters, forced migration, and the other impacts of the climate emergency, as well as the improved resources for people caring for those experiencing this ongoing trauma. I experience a complicated hope. Hope that is not about guaranteeing the outcomes we desire, but rather certainty that we are supporting each other while we do the noble and sacred work of our times that we are called to do, independent of the outcomes. In fact, the Climate Pastoral Care course that I co-authored has a module that explores such complicated hope in depth. I do want to share a few resources for further exploration of these themes that may be of interest to you if you're listening to this talk today. These are all accessible through WaterSpirit's website. That's www.waterspirit.org. And several of these events are on our events calendar currently. First, I want to share the Climate Pastoral Care course, which is co-authored by Jessica Moorthorpe from Australia and myself, based here in the US. This is an online, self-paced, independent study course that through 13 in-depth modules walks you through many different aspects of what climate pastoral care looks like in a Christian context. Students who are enrolled in the course have access to a Facebook community and periodic drop-in sessions, and you can do it on your own time. It costs about $145 but we currently have a scholarship application open until August 1st, where you can apply to study the course for free. Instead of studying independently, if you prefer to undertake this material with a supportive group of learners, our friends at the BTS Center will be hosting a cohort called Navigating Climate Spiritual Care. Applications for that cohort close on September 15th, so you still have a couple of months to get your application in. And that dynamic learning community will meet online from October through March. And additionally, in the fall, we will return with our next round of our 10-step eco-anxiety support group, which uses the Good Grief Network's 10-step program method. On September 4th from 7 to 8 p.m. New York time, we'll have an info session that explains what to expect in that group. And that helps everybody who comes to that session make the decision about whether they'd like to enroll in the full 10 weeks. This is the topic that I'm particularly passionate about and feel like we all have to get up to speed on in order to support the youth and everybody else in our society today. So if you'd like to continue the conversation, please feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Blair, for sharing that with us. And absolutely, at the beginning, you were talking about the terrible stigma that surrounds mental health. And when you combine that with the impacts of climate change, climate anxiety, it's just so important for us to understand the unique intersection that creates and why it's so important for us to adopt this solution, like a very specific approach towards addressing climate anxiety, that it can't just be an afterthought. I think that your presentation definitely reflected that. And thank you as well for sharing your upcoming events and how people can get involved in this, fight to ensure that this is recognized as a legitimate issue and we're able to actually create solutions that bring about hope. So thank you once again, Blair, for sharing your perspectives with us today. I will now hand over the floor to Immaculate to sing. The floor is yours.
Hey, sorry, just a minute. Okay, I have it. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you so much, Blair. I took a little bit of a different approach where I actually first thought to myself what climate anxiety mean and hope, and also cultivating resilience. And one of the things that kind of inspired me when I was preparing this presentation were the words of Love Havel about hope, that hope is not the same as joy that things are going well, or willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for early success, but rather an ability to work for something because it is good, not just because it stands a chance to succeed. Hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. So this one kind of also made me kind of think how, before I look at the climate, cultivating hope and climate anxiety in my context, how does climate anxiety look in my context? And I thought that I would better explain that in picture. As you see this picture, it was after Cyclone Freddy. These children who were with, most of them had lost their homes, had lost their family, had lost almost everything. So that kind of, the picture that kind really speak anxiety in my context. It may not be that people are anxious about really maybe the world coming to an end, but it is kind of really what is happening around them and what they are seeing, like the youths, their life shattered in front of them. So these are just images of how climate anxiety look like in my context. And when I thought of hope and resilience, I also love these words of Greta, who is also a youth, that once we start to act, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action. Then, and only then, hope will come. So we do kind of small actions that actually we believe as medical mission sisters here in Uganda cultivate hope, but also resilience. And one of the things is eco-education. We teach the youths, and also this is kind of a forum where they can also share, understand the crisis, understand their contribution in small ways, and they become champions also to teach others and to go out and do actually what is necessary. And this keeps them resilient and also hopeful, because kind of there is action. The same thing we do in this line is advocacy. We do TV programs, radio programs, and these sometimes are on kind of different themes, or maybe seasons, like Laudato Si Week, the season of creation, where we bring youths to speak about maybe what they do, how they participate, and talk about really what they experience and how they what they think about the whole kind of climate crisis, and the anxieties, share the anxieties that they experience and the challenges. And under advocacy, we also have different campaigns that come up. For me, as I say, the action, what we do is normally really create opportunities for action. And I think in the paper that was presented, it was like sometimes they are so distressed, they go bury themselves in their phones, or, you know, kind of lose hope in that way. But I see that these kind of small actions, they may not be going to kind of bring about the results that maybe everyone would like to see, but the fact that they go out to do them kind of makes them resilient and hopeful. And yeah, they express themselves. These are kind of forums where they actually express themselves and also tell us, the grown-ups, what they are feeling and how they would like us to see behaving, and also being role models. Yeah, these are all activities that actually we engage young people in. And one of the things we do, partnering with the Permaculture Uganda, they do a permaculture design. The youths, the young people are trained in permaculture designs. Some of these are very simple methods of farming. And here you can see them being trained in briquette making, which is, I don't know whether you really know these briquettes, but it's kind of a form of green energy. They're an alternative of charcoal, where charcoal burning is really so much here in Uganda. So they are trained in this, and they can also sell and earn from them. And after that, they are also trained in making Lorena stoves, which are also eco stoves, which they can use the briquettes in instead of firewood. And also they are trained in sustainable kind of farming, where they also do organic farming, which organic manure they make themselves, and they learn different techniques, like here making swales, sack gardens, for those maybe who don't have big lands or are living in town, something like this. So they do really things for themselves, and they are very excited about it. They teach others, and they are able to grow their food. And also we involve them in kind of tree planting. So it's just really the approach I took is that when the youths are involved and also they are trained in some skills, somehow they become resilient. And when there is action, they inspire others to act, they involve others, there is hope. And we also gather, by the way, sometimes to pray, sometimes online, sometimes we have a kind of walks, meditation walks. And so, yeah, we keep the youths around us and those we encounter in that kind of environment or mood. The hope may not come completely, but yeah, as we saw in the first kind of quotation, that's it. It's really about doing something small. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Immaculate, for sharing that with us, the very concrete solutions that are helping to make sure that we're not just thinking about hope as an abstract concept, but actually making it a reality by taking these small but extremely important steps. I love that you spoke about, eco stoves, for example. Like the work that my team and I do as well, we've seen how like even these smallest solutions can have sometimes the biggest impact, and that sustains the hope. So I'm really glad that you were sharing these very concrete ground level solutions, especially to address today's very important topic. So thank you once again, Immaculate. I will now hand over the floor to Thomas Gould. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for having me. I thought I would share a little bit about my climate story today, because and how the church played a role in that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So for me, my climate story began when my parents showed me An Inconvenient Truth at 9 years old when I was in Mexico, and it left a pretty big impact. And what was crazy about the movie to me as a child was looking around and saying, okay, so everyone agrees that this is happening. The science is relatively settled. It's become more and more obvious over time, but we know it's happening. What is anyone doing about this? And I, from a very early age, did not get a sense that people were altering their behavior or making the adjustments that would be needed for addressing climate change. And so in college, I was part of a energy and climate concentration study at Yale. And it was back in 2016. 2016 was an election year, and hopes for climate kind of fell off even further. And then when I graduated into the COVID-19 pandemic, it was a very upsetting time for everyone for many different reasons, one of which was that like we could finally see the global impact that one debilitating virus could have. And we all know that climate change is barreling down at us, and that we have a very limited number of years to really course correct. And graduating from college into a terrible kind of job market, things are locked down. There's a real sense of helplessness where, I don't have a household that I can, be energy to like install solar panels myself. I won't really have, my own building to install solar panels on. I'm not going to be able to afford an electric vehicle as a college recent graduate. And so one of the best things I did out of college was I joined the Episcopal Service Corps, where I joined a parish in upstate New York, living on the campus and working for the priest, who very happily, luckily for me, was just starting to rehabilitate the diocese-wide Creation Care Committee. And that was really meaningful because what I learned in my course of time there is that I may not personally own the land, but I'm still a member of a community that has buildings, that has assets that can be upgraded. And I'm part of a larger society that also makes decisions on a regular basis that can be very pro-environment or very pro climate change aversion. And so one of the things that we realized was that thanks to my training in college, we did a review of the property and found that we could remove a third of the CO2 emissions that they were putting out each year by just upgrading from a gas guzzling furnace to heat pumps, which are a burgeoning piece of equipment. And best part about it is that it would actually save the church over time, and that it would pay itself off within a matter of 2 or 3 years. So some of those solutions seem pretty commonsensical. And then coupled with that is that, okay, so we can begin installing the electrical changes that we need. But then because we're already reliant on electrical, that means that when we do eventually put in solar panels, the entire site can become net neutral. And then looking even further, because it was a diocese-wide committee, is that you realize that your parish, the community you're in, is a member of several hundred other communities in just that one section of the state of New York alone. And that whole community has a portfolio of properties that over the course of time, in 1 year, release 16,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent gases. And all of those are potentials for reduction. And so suddenly you start to see that you may have a very small input, but you are also part, as a member of the church and as part of a community, of a much larger and bigger picture. And if you can do what you're doing and be connected with others also in the community who are also doing well, then suddenly it amounts to real progress. And I think that's kind of what the communion and the Eucharist is like on a theological basis. So now I want to share with you, I finished my service corps year. I'm now working with the Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns. And as a result, looking at much broader, we work for the Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers, the Maryknoll Sisters of St. Dominic, and Maryknoll Lay Missioners, doing advocacy on Washington, D.C. and at the UN on a series of different issues in our portfolio, among them integral ecology and climate change. And I wanted to share with you some of the successes that the Maryknoll family has had that I find really exciting and very inspiring. And the first off, the Maryknoll Sisters of St. Dominic, a couple of years back, signed off 42 acres of their property in a conservation easement, which essentially ensures that for perpetuity, that land will always be a carbon sink, that it will capture and store carbon instead of becoming developed and becoming just another part of our carbon buildup. And then the other very impressive project was that Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers installed a massive solar array in pre-existing parking lots. And this small, it's not so small, it's pretty large array, has the power and can generate electricity for up to 200 homes in the area. And so suddenly we're seeing very large impact. And so one last final example that I'm very proud of is that the community that I was part of with the Episcopal Service Corps, that parish is now finally doing the process of installing their heat pumps. And I'll be looking and seeing their reduction in CO2 outputs over the course of next year. And then also being able to take that case study and see all the savings that that parish makes, and being able to show it to the other parishes in the diocese so that all other fuel-consuming parishes can make the switch over to electric and then continue to build off of that progress. So I find that really inspiring, and I hope that other people can see that even those small actions can add up, especially when multiplied by the power of communities such as the church. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for sharing that intersectional work, faith and climate, the inspiring solutions. And I love that you said that, these small actions can definitely build up and be amplified by the power of community. That is so very important. And that's something that we cannot afford to forget as we kind of go ahead in this fight towards a more sustainable future. So thank you once again, Thomas. And thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your very important insights at today's webinar on this really critical topic. Right before we open the floor for questions from the audience, I am seeing that there are quite a few questions for our panelists in the chat. I want to very quickly give our panelists the opportunity to just share any questions or comments they might have for one another. And once we hear from you, I'll open up the floor for questions. So if any of our panelists have any burning thoughts or comments right before we go to Q&A. And feel free to just unmute and speak.
I just wanted to thank Thomas for sharing a bit of your story, your personal story in this. And I found what you shared like very, just really, really hopeful, really inspiring, just to see how what seems small, when you connect it out into a larger picture, you can see the impact that it's having. So I think that's, such a good reminder. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melody, for sharing that. Anyone else?
The phrase that jumped out to me was one that Blair used, and it's that notion of complicated hope. And I think that's, I think for me at least, that really, it grabs our attention to both the hopefulness that we have, but all of the ways in which it's hard to be hopeful and to cultivate hope. And yet still so very necessary. And I really like that phrase. And I think I might steal it if you don't mind.
I'm sure it's not original to me. As far as where I first came across it, I no longer recall. I know that Joanna Macy talks about active hope. Rebecca Smolnit talks about hope in the dark. So I tend to gravitate toward a few of those models of hope that include those additional phrases or adjectives or qualifiers. And actually, I wanted to thank Sister Immaculate for bringing in the Václav Havel quote at the beginning of her presentation. That's another one that reflects hope the way that I tend to feel it, and then also got written into our climate pastoral care course. Hope as not a precondition to action, but rather something that might possibly emerge, but that the community support and action is where we need to put our energy regardless. And it was fascinating for me to see a number of through lines linking each of our presentations together, either from similar sources like the Václav Havel quote, or Ray's amazing work through Jen Dredd, or the inspiration of Laudato Si, or the importance of getting our hands in the soil in farming. So it's been interesting to see the nodes on this network connecting us all.
Absolutely. I think those interconnections just made the panel even more inspiring. So yeah, you all did a wonderful job of conveying the very important messages that we really need now to kind of turn into action, and that will help us build hope for the future. So if anyone has, yes, I see Hilda's unmuted.
I would also like to add that in terms of listening to all these different stories that come from these different places in which you are locally involved in forms of activism, show that it really is important that we kind of go to the grassroots. And that, you know, what I saw in reading about hopelessness among youth, and Thomas, is that you referred to that as well, when you kind of look at the bigger picture of what is happening on the scale of world politics. And, you know, right now the picture is very bleak again. And so that is also, makes young people especially, but also me, very, you know, at times despairing, because you feel that we all need to pull together, and instead we are kind of pulling even further apart. So that's why these local initiatives and kind of really naming what is happening, as you do, what happened with the Marinol sisters, what they were doing, and what Melody is doing in her gardening, and courses that tend to pastoral care. All those really, these projects are so hopeful and so important to kind of keep us going. So thank you very much for sharing those.
Absolutely, that is very true. Like those small actions building on one another and creating greater impact. So thank you for highlighting that once again. I see that we have a lot of questions in the chat, and if anyone else, if you do have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. The first question that we have now is for Melody. What kind of changes have you witnessed in the young people who come to work on your farm? What kind of changes, movement, growth have you noticed in yourself? Over to you.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I would say there's a public school just next door to our farm. So we've had the opportunity to work quite closely with them. And students have come over the last few years through workshops or just coming to walk through the farm. And during COVID, that was really important. And I think the teachers were quite grateful to have like an outdoor space to bring their classes. Yeah, and I think it just recently, we had some feedback from one of the workshops that the kids had come over, and one of the responses from a student was that, oh, like I loved planting the plant, that I made a plant that we were planting, because I have never planted a plant before. And that really moved me, that our farm could be a place where, you know, city kids who might not have land access, who might not have, you know, anybody in their life that is growing stuff, then they have that chance to be exposed to it, and to be outside and work with soil. And so I think that's the chance that we have, especially with that school, because they can come over throughout the year, see the farm change through the seasons, and as well as come back in subsequent grades. That relationship building, I think, has been really special. And then in terms of my own, sorry, trying to see what the question is again. My own growth, I appreciated earlier on, there was some background around trauma, and how that affects our minds, our bodies, our emotions. And I think for me, working with land, it's been very healing. I think a lot of people experience that and feel that, whether that's they enjoy hiking or whether they love gardening. And for me, like perhaps it was not so much climate grief, but other vicarious trauma I had from previous ministry work. Through farming, I definitely felt so much more grounded and healthy and joyful and hopeful. So I've noticed that in the last number of years.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Melody, for your response. Our next question is for Blair. Can you give an example of the kinds of rituals you share in your course that help young people experience and integrate eco-grief?
Absolutely. Just to give you a little taste, in the course, I know we link to a resource by Extinction Rebellion, which is a ritual of 4 gateways of climate grief. So it's a ritual that involves a sharing circle where everybody brings what they're authentically feeling about the climate crisis into the circle. There are different stations with different prompts where people also react, share what it is they're feeling. There's candle lighting involved, and then a collective transmutation of those feelings together to breathe and lift the weight off. But there's a number of different ways to embody and process these kinds of feelings. For example, I think of the Church of the Woods here in the United States that holds its Sunday worship outside in the forest. And I think so much of Jesus' ministry, healing ministry, had to do with reintegration into community and to direct contact as healing contact. So getting out into the woods in and of itself can help us anchor ground and heal. There's a similar kind of energy behind Church of the Woods that influences why Water Spirit holds seasonal celebrations on the equinox and solstices. Those are open to people from any faith background, but similarly, we always hold space for not only the beautiful and inspiring parts of what the season can teach us, but also a space to say, take a leaf cut out and put it on our tree saying, this is somebody I miss. This is somebody who I'm grieving for. This is some place that I'm grieving for, that we can all hold in our hearts together as a moment within a larger ritual container. And a really beautiful resource was the BTS Center's Lament with Earth series. This one was online and they've run it for 2 years now. It's a collaboration with a musical group called The Many, and they specifically use Christian resources of lament to guide people through online sharing sessions. They're chat chaplains that help process what people are feeling as they come up. They sing hymns, they lead each other through laments where we say, Lord, have mercy and forgive us for our ecological sins and so forth. But it's just done so beautifully and so well. So if you find Lament with Earth on BTS Center's website, that's another great example of a way to do this kind of work.
Thank you for your response, Blair. There are 2 questions for Immaculate. One, can you talk a bit more about Laudato Si as the basis of your work? And the second is, what are the materials that make the briquettes?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for the first one. Actually, Laudato Si is the basis of everything that I do. I started all this work when I did the Laudato Si and Metas course. And after that, I really felt called, as I always tell the people that, yeah, I had the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, as Pope Francis puts it. So I took another course with Laudato Si movement to become a Laudato Si animator. And after that, I accompanied many to become Laudato Si animators, and I created many circles, and that's how I also engage with the youths. For what are the materials for the making briquettes? There are several. First of all, it's like anything dry can be almost, of course, there are those that, like, it depends on the place where you are. Like if it is in the place where they grow maize, you know, the how do you call it? The corn, empty corn, and also the maize stalk. They use those dry ones for making briquettes. They burn them and they make, you know, biochar. And then, you know, those kind of things they make. And it depends also, like in a particular place where we're making these briquettes, they make sugarcane. So from the sugarcane, they also make molasses, which is something actually that mostly they are not even going to use after getting the kind of sugar that they want. So that one is the one they use to bind it. It is very cheap and you can get it in large amounts. So if they use that, what else they use? Mostly waste from the garden, the things they cut from the garden and dry. And then there is a process. They have machines. Those who don't have machines, they do it kind of in a local way possible. You can also use clay soil. And in this place, they have plenty of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Immaculate. And our final question is for Thomas. What advice do you have for young people who wish to become involved in climate action?
That's a really good question. And I think it might be an easy answer to say. I'm going to a couple easy things. It's number one, you can first off try to see what's being done already, because there are already a lot of groups that you can become involved in. And if you find that there's something that's not being addressed, feel free to start something yourself. But you know, within the church and other existing communities, sometimes you'll be surprised that a little bit of unearthing, you can discover good work that people are already doing. Another way to get involved, and this is a bit of a shameless promotion here, but Maryknoll Office for Global Concerns happen to provide several resources, as well as, you know, a lot of other groups also put in, but I'll put in the chat. We put out prayers. We have actions you can take. Being involved politically is another great way. I mean, there's almost always some policy affecting climate that is up for vote, and you can let your members of Congress or politicians know that it's something that is of interest to you. I think those are the main ones that come off the top of my head.
Thank you for sharing that, Thomas. And with that, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all of our presenters and panelists today for sharing your insights on a topic that is of tremendous importance right now, a very intersectional topic, because we are facing climate change, which in and of itself is a wicked problem that has many, many intersectional impacts. And one of the greatest impacts being the very unseen issues that it creates, namely the climate anxiety, the mental and emotional and psychological stress that it creates, particularly on our most vulnerable communities. And as I'm really glad that we were able to bring together people who are really sharing the solutions that we can implement and are being implemented to kind of build on one another to create that hope, not leaving it as something that is very far away or can't be achieved, but something that we're creating right now through these concrete ground level solutions. And looking at this very existential threat, it's a very natural response to look at it and say, like, okay, what do we do? It's so difficult to address this. There's nothing that can be done. But I feel that today's panel definitely gave us hope for building a very climate resilient present and future, and through these concrete ground level solutions. And as we have the HLPF negotiations going on, it's really wonderful to hear from people who are actually implementing solutions through their work. So thank you to all of our presenters and panelists. And with that, I will turn it over now to Sister Sarah Rudolph, the Social Justice Animator of the Mary Watts Center, to lead our small group exercise.
Thank you, Kikishan. I think we're actually going to have a conversation in the large group instead. We don't have a whole lot of time, only 10 minutes left for our webinar today. So I'm going to share my screen, and we have some questions for reflection. Based on what you have heard today, the inputs we've received, just take a few moments to think about, what is your experience of climate anxiety? How do you cultivate resilience and hope in your own context? And as others were sharing the practices and resources from their faith traditions, what practices or resources from your faith tradition or some other source can contribute toward cultivating resilience and hope in response to climate anxiety? So let's just take a moment to think about this, and then I'm going to invite us to share our experiences together in this group. It doesn't need to be through the chat. You can raise your hand if you wish to speak. I will take a look, and I'm going to leave this questions on the screen for a few minutes so you can see them. But if anybody would like to share their own reactions, would be most welcome. or some other response or insight you received from the presentations today. Lucy, I'm going to stop sharing screen and you can unmute yourself.
Sure. I notice that in myself, I have a lot of fear around fire. And there is fire in New Jersey in the Pine Barrens, something that I've worried about for some years. And my family live in northern Alberta, and they are very close to where the fires were last year, and I think the year before. The time was kind of blurred. One family friend escaped damage, and she had neighbors who lost everything, and they were miles apart. So it feels close in some ways because of where it is in northern Alberta, around in the Peace River country. The reality that Yellowknife, the whole town, had to be evacuated, it sucks my breath away. So I do notice I have a lot of anxiety when I hear about the fires. There is something about being present to feelings of fear as they arise, and rather than resist, simply to be present, to really, that present-centered awareness is very helpful. And I am really inspired by the program today and by the efforts of all of those who have presented, and the leadership of young adults in our world and younger people for the slow response of adults in leadership up until now, and all the small actions that we do personally and communally make a difference. I'm also connected with Medical Mission Sisters and feel grateful to be part of a congregation, and you know, along with many other congregations, women religious are really taking a big lead in the world. And I'm grateful to be part of that, and grateful to all who organized this event for the hope that it gives. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. I just want to read out the comment in the chat from Audrey Ferrer. She says, my climate anxiety is one as a mother who worries for my 3 girls and what lies in the future for them. Thank you, Audrey.
I just wanted to say about some resilience, a couple of things that we've done here for resilience. We had a wonderful outdoor mass for a whole parish on our property for Environment Day. And also we have had groups come and just walk around the property silently and admire all the beauty of the nature, and then come inside into the chapel and share what they had felt, their feelings and their observations. It did a lot of getting us back to nature.
Thanks, Barbara. Marianne and then Kathy.
Just to, as we're talking about resources, thank you for these presentations. I think, you know, I really, it's embedded in me the importance of small grassroots actions that together are creating kind of a wave. And the thing that, as a resource, I think, you know, certainly within the Catholic community, but it's open to other people as well, is the Laudato Si action platform, where people can really share ideas, where you can go and search and be inspired about what other people are doing, and maybe even find people who are doing something in your area. So I just think that's a wonderful resource, and it seems to be really taking off in the last years. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. It's a great resource. Kathy?
Hello. I think what gives me hope and resilience is immersing myself in the knowledge, indigenous knowledge, like seeking those indigenous leaders that are speaking and have such a profound connection with the earth. I just can't get enough of it. I bought this book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmer, And it's just like the Bible to me. It's like, it's a totally different consciousness. And the other thing that it gives me a good dose of hope is looking at our 13.7 billion year journey. It is fraught with all kinds of disasters, near extinctions, chaos, and then creativity. And when I take my little scary life and I put it in that bigger picture, it's like, wow, I want to be part of that ongoing story. It's going to ongo. There will be creativity coming. And I'm inspired by the young people that we heard today. What a go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, Sister Melba.
Just Kathy, the same, almost the same thought that Kathy about the tradition of the indigenous people. I lived in Guatemala for years, and I was in a very, very, how to say, far away community, indigenous, and it was so beautiful how people could handle it, the anxiety. And I could handle it too, but I am telling you, this is long time ago, 30 years ago. And now with after COVID, now we still remember what we did with the young people over there, breathing, just admire nature, taking care of nature. And now I am thinking about what we could incorporate, what experience, because we have a lot of experience that we could really cultivate resilience and hope, and to share, like, thank you very much for this beautiful chat that we could have, all the people who have shared, and has been really very helpful. And we could maybe continue looking for some resources to share with others, because really is, could you believe how the anxiety could think people if they could be a parents or not? This is a child to bring kids for this world or not. That is something, because the humanity has to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Melba. And Cecilia, you'll have the last word before we move into our closing.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, I'm actually a person who suffers climate anxiety. And I live in Spain, in Madrid, and it actually gets hot here every summer, and it's getting hotter every summer. But one of the things that I'm just so aware of is that, you know, the vast majority of people just put on the air conditioning, you know, in summer, those who can afford it. And then it's lovely and cool inside. And then on the contrary, in winter, we put on the heating and it's lovely and warm inside. But then we do not think about the effect that that is actually having on the environment, and it's actually increasing the climate crisis, you know. So I think it's one, and that actually creates a lot of anxiety in me, because I'm aware of this, but also aware that, you know, of the survival part of it, and what can we do about this. You know, I'd just like to share that, because I don't know if any of the rest of you have this kind of problem in your parts of the world.
Thank you,
I see.
Cecilia.
So yes.
Thanks, Cecilia, and thank you to everyone for sharing and for joining us today. I'm going to pass it over to Sister Jane Caspilio to close our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. So on behalf of the organizers of this event, the IBVM Loreto Generalate, Congregation of Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace, Medical Mission Sisters, and Maryknoll Sisters, and our event partners, I would like to thank you, our distinguished speakers, for orienting us on climate anxiety, climate trauma, ecological grief, and for giving us some of your in-depth experiences, knowledge, and insights, and concrete means to cultivate resilience and hope in the face of climate crisis. I also would like to express my deep gratitude to all our participants for joining us in this parallel event on the first day of the UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development 2024. Thank you so much for your interest and enthusiasm. We heard the effects of this situation, particularly the distress among young people, an area that nations, communities are not taking notice of in looking at and implementing SDG 13 or climate action. This parallel event awakened us to a reality that should concern us all, yet draws us to be hopeful, to be sensitive, more compassionate, to act here and now together. As what the representative of Sri Lanka mentioned in his statement at the HLPF meeting today, we cannot leave our youth a wounded planet with all the unbearable baggage that our generation will leave behind. So, as the invitations of our speakers, let us pool our psychological, ecological, spiritual resources. Let us embody hope, form safety nets, inspire others. For small actions can be amplified by a community. Another world is possible and necessary. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again in our future events.